Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last and fourth event of the Open Mic series. We gathered throughout the year to talk about the future of AI in healthcare. We talked about the carbon footprint of the healthcare industry and about healthcare in the metaverse. And today's topic is the Digital Pharma Playbook. And I'm super happy to have once again, a very experienced speaker panel with us to talk about this topic in more depth. My name is Rael Schneider. I am community manager at the Switzerland Innovation Park Basel area here on Novartis campus. We host around 25 digital health startups by now. Our organization works as a catalyst for innovation and progress. This means we engage people with ideas. We provide a platform, we provide infrastructure for their businesses to grow, and we try to bring them closer to the healthcare ecosystem. Normally, my colleague Anka would be with me today from DayOne Healthcare Innovation, but unfortunately, she's sick today. But on the bright side, we have Lucas Scherdel here. He's moderating today's session. He's the director from DayOne and will give you more input on what they're doing and their activities in 2023. And hint, 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 the Digital Pharma Playbook is a big thing for next year. A warm welcome also to everyone who joined us online today. Please, also everyone on site, get involved in the discussion by using Mentimeter. We will show the QR code in a minute, and you can raise your questions via the app. But now, without further ado, I hand over to Lucas and wish you a very enjoyable evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rahel. Great. Yes, thank you very much, Rahel. And I just wanted to say a huge and big warm welcome on this very cold day that we have here in Basel. It's a great pleasure to see you all, and thank you all for joining on the fourth and final installment that we have in the Open Mic Next in Health series. Today we're going to be discussing something which is very close to our heart at DayOne. For those of you that don't know, DayOne is a health tech accelerator and an open innovation platform which is designed to accelerate digital transformation in the life science industries. One of the things that we see more and more is that the biopharmaceutical value chain is transforming extremely rapidly, and where better to have a discussion about that than here in Europe's life sciences capital of the Basel area. So I'm really excited to be able to host this discussion with you today. I'm really excited to welcome some extremely experienced experts and esteemed guests on stage very shortly, and to have a conversation about what it means to partner in the biopharmaceutical industry to create that digital transformation. What goes wrong, what goes right, and how can we work together to achieve that most effectively? But before we move on to that discussion, there is a shameless plug from us at DayOne, and I'd like to welcome to the stage Jubin Shah, who's been working with DayOne on our Digital Pharma Playbook, which we're excited to launch in 2023, and to provide some initial insights on that work. So welcome to the stage to Jubin Shah.
I hope you can hear me well. So I'm one of the off-the-book speaker today, and you don't find me in the agenda, but that's what makes it surprising and the event more interesting. That's what I believe. Okay, we were just discussing a few minutes before, and we came up to this point that we have probably more questions to ask than the answers available, but we need to start from somewhere, and that's what we are talking today with this Digital Pharma Playbook. So my name is Jubin Shah. I work as a product manager with a medtech startup in Germany, but I came across Lucas and DayOne team, and that's where our discussion started, that why cannot we do something where we can initiate and support the community of digital health in navigating this complex path, or allow them to navigate this whole path in partnerships. So with that, why do we need a playbook, or why do we need some kind of a guideline to approach the partnerships? And that's where we understand the whole digital health ecosystem is evolving with pandemic, with some of the new regulations which are coming up, and also the demand as such from the patients or the final user. That's where we think the whole ecosystem is evolving. There are more diverse stakeholders. So for example, tech companies are getting from every direction, to put it mildly. It's also a bit fairly unstructured approach that how these partnerships work. I don't need to mention or go a bit more in depth, I think most of you understand how complex these partnership models are. Also, it's a long open-ended approach where not many of the engagement lead to a partnership. And probably with that, so what we are trying to do with the Digital Pharma Playbook is provide this navigation map, kind of a map, which allows the partnerships to happen a bit more efficiently, a bit more quickly between startups and pharma, but also between pharma and tech companies or startups with tech companies. So what we are trying to do here is have stakeholders from very diverse background, which could be, for example, innovation leads from pharma companies or tech leads from big tech companies, or also founders from startups. But then we also have some of the catalyzers, for example, DayOne or Galen Growth, who are participating in some of these interviews. And what kind of content it would cover is kind of an overview of the whole ecosystem, who are the key decision makers, what's kind of the scouting process, which has been part of the ecosystem or which has been followed till now, but how it's also changing and so on. And you can see some of the content, and it is definitely some of the very interesting insights which we are getting right now. So to give you some of the initial assessment or initial insights, what we could understand from the interviews, as I said before, the ecosystem is evolving, but it's also going towards maturity. It's been a decade. There has been an opinion that it's still not mature, but we are definitely into that direction. Also, the role of stakeholders is evolving, whether it's accelerators, whether it's the digital innovation teams, whether it's the tech companies, all of their roles are evolving, they are understanding, they're learning, and they are trying to fit in. Well, pharma companies are also developing in-house capacity. So before we understood that scouting was all kind of an external process, but those processes are also becoming internalized. There is a difference in understanding of partnering between pharma or startups, and you can see some of these insights. I don't need to go in the details right away. So just to give you an insight, what we could map out is this initial kind of a chart or a map where whether it's early stage startups or the startups at the MVP or kind of the finance round of Series A, those are some of the most interesting phases for the big organizations. And what kind of map you need to look into is you need to kind of map the whole target organization, understand who are the kind of the people with budget, and how do you proceed by engaging with multiple teams, and also who are the people involved in the decision making. So this is just the initial glimpse of what we would be covering a bit more in depth. Now, what's kind of the plan we want to follow for releasing the playbook is, right now we are conducting the interviews and we are nearly kind of 60 to 70% done. But by mid next year, we would like to have the first draft and have a final release before the end of the next year, and also have a supporting event for that. With that, how can you engage? It would be great to have more thought leadership covered through the playbook. So please feel free to contact Lucas, or also feel free to reach out to me after the event. I would be happy to discuss a bit more in detail what kind of questions we are covering and how we are going through the process as such. With that, I would like to thank again Lucas and all of you for listening to my slides or listening to me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you very much, Jeevan. Thank you so much. And if that is in any way interesting to you, or you do have some kind of interest in working with the playbook in the future, or would like to contribute further, then please do reach out to myself or Jeevan at any time. We'd love you to be in touch. As we move forward, it's time for our discussion. So I'd like to welcome our speakers onto the stage. Please join me, speakers. Now, Leslie, we're going to start with you. So firstly, I'd like to welcome Leslie Fendt to the stage. Leslie, you're one of the leaders of the first leaders of a software as a medical device initiative at Roche, right? Mm-hmm. And you have been contributing to Roche's overall digital health infrastructure for some time. You've now worked at the global and affiliate level, and you're actually a Basel native and chemist by training, right? So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what interests you in this subject.
What doesn't interest me? No, I mean, so most of my career actually has been in traditional pharma, right? And so I rose the ranks in pretty standard traditional pharma sales and marketing, commercial strategy, leadership roles. And what I just couldn't take my eyes off this emerging industry on the side. And more through my projects, I was also in my daily work getting involved with it, still with my traditional hat on, but it just became more and more prominent in my daily work. And then I just couldn't resist and jumped sideways into our now emerging digital health program. And it's been really a blast ever since. So, pharma is obviously an extremely mature, we just had, Roche just celebrated 125th anniversary. It's a very mature industry. Digital health is anything but, and I really enjoy that. The other thing that I really enjoy is that we're in a much less competitive space than with pharma, where, between the two sides of the river, we have to be careful what we share, who we engage with. And I feel with digital health, it's so much more open, case in point, also what you're just talking about. So I love that as well. And I just also love that I can sit in my home of Roche and really help it embrace this totally new area for ourselves. So great. Super exciting.
An emerging and exciting agenda in the industry. We'll go to you next, Stefan Suter. So just to introduce Stefan, you are the head of Holmusk Europe, which is a real-world data analytics company. You are actually an example of a successful partnership between an early-stage company and pharma, right? And with your company focusing on data analytics in mental health, you're also a co-founder, so you're wearing two hats in this, as you were the co-founder of Cura Health, and you have over 2 decades of experience in the biopharmaceutical industry, which is pretty impressive. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what interests you in this kind of work.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I have a similar background, maybe to some extent. Yeah, I've spent a number of years in the biopharmaceutical world with Roche and Novartis, being as well Swiss-based and in Basel. And I always had this idea of value-based healthcare as the next leap in to make healthcare systems more sustainable, which I think is obvious they are not today. They are not built for sustainability. And I think that's something we need to overcome over the next decade. And I see technology as a fundamental driver for enabling that. And now I'm 4 years jumped out of the large pharmas and then doing my own company as well as being part of Holmusk, where we apply that and have gained quite a lot of traction in dealing with real-world data. I think that's where I feel we can contribute to the overall landscape of accelerating the R&D process in the biopharmaceutical industry, allowing more patients to actually being considered in research. We all know that if you run a randomized clinical trial, you're talking about maybe 20% of the population that the GP or a specialist would treat out there in the world. And I think using routine care data, real-world data, I think we can really make an effort to include a broader spectrum and make research at the end faster and cheaper. I think that would be our contribution. Hopefully, Holmusk is focusing fully on mental health, psychiatry. That's where we are working on, and you were alluding to that. The host here, or Novartis, is an investor in Holmusk. All major pharma companies doing research on our data set. So I think that's positive that to show that small companies can make an impact and can be partnering with large pharmaceutical companies.
Very, very inspiring for all the small companies we have with us. We'll go to you next, Sara. So you're leading the research team at Galen Growth, which is a leading health tech intelligence platform. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you do and how you're approaching the problem.
Thanks, Lucas. It's nice to be here. Appreciate the invitation. Quickly to my background, it's a bit different from the other two panelists because I have a medical device background. Been working in medical devices for about 10 years. 8 years ago, I started with a late-stage startup company in Olten called Sensal Medical. And there I was program director for a 3-way development agreement. So we were developing a connected insulin pump together with Sanofi and Verily. So welcome to being in a startup, on the side of the startup, working with the big pharma companies. It's there, really realizing the power of digital health, right, of connecting medical devices, as it may be, and of course the challenges that come with partnering with pharma or any large medical device company. And so there, jumping then to my current position with Galen Growth. Galen Growth was founded in Singapore by our CEO, Julian de Salaberry, who's sitting here with me. And it's really Julian coming from Merck and realizing that big pharma, this was 8 years ago, big pharma getting started with digital health, it's really hard to navigate, right? How it's kind of a tech space, it's a startup space, and where do you start with coming from a big pharma? So that's where we started building our platform, HealthTech Alpha, which is a platform. It's the global leader in digital health private venture, data, analytics, and intelligence. And with that platform, with our collection of more than 12,000 digital health ventures across the globe, we help a lot of pharma companies find new partners. We help them navigate the ecosystem or understand their own portfolio. Of course, helping insurance companies, investors, as it may be. But we can also then publish on a very regular basis every month and semi-annually ecosystem reports, right? What's going on in digital health, so that we can really start explaining this ecosystem. We have the data, so we start explaining the ecosystem and the trends that are going on, right? Of course, we were sitting here at the end of last year and everyone's super excited, digital health, yeah, there's this boom, right? Everyone's, it's all going so quickly, and the ventures are growing because they have all this money. And this year, then the bitter reality that venture funding is actually shrinking. It's not going to be this giant boom that we had in the pandemic. Rather, we're coming back to a bit of a reality, and that's what we see now. I'm happy to talk about, add a few numbers. I like giving statistics and numbers about how, now digital health is really, we're being able to focus, right? Those ventures are consolidating, being able to focus the efforts and really turn to the solutions that have evidence, right? The solutions that we know have a good business case. So it's an exciting time to be in digital health, and it's very motivating to see, to talk with Leslie and Stefan to understand how they're really putting this into motion and making it happen.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sarah. And we're definitely going to be coming to you for some of those statistics in a little while. So it's quite a complicated topic, right? And one of the things we struggle a bit with is defining exactly what digital health is and what we're talking about. So I'm going to really simplify things just so that we're all on the same page. I'm going to start with a simple question. What to you is a digital asset, and why should we be interested in them as a pharmaceutical industry? And if it's too tricky, you can pass it to the next person. Maybe, Leslie, you could tell us, because you're leading a digital asset, right? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. Although I don't think that my own experience kind of covers all the definitions of a digital asset, right? So, and of course at Roche, it's almost like a little country, and we have so many villages and people doing different things. And when it comes to digital transformation, so in my space, it's very much integrated solutions. We also is a term we always use, because it's really about going from a kind of transactional, here's your medicine, you have a sickness, here's your medicine, you give us, or the insurance gives us a certain amount of money back, towards designing integrated care solutions for patients and for physicians. And so within that scope, many of them are digital, and many of them cross then the line towards being qualified as regulated as a device. And so that's really the space that me and my department we play in, and that can go into disease management, monitoring, diagnosis. In the future, this could be clinical decision support, things like that. But that's really just kind of my neighborhood in Roche. And then we also have groups looking into R&D effectiveness. Real-world data is a huge topic for us, that's been digitally disrupted. And then of course we have also the omnichannel revolution, which is a whole other topic. But I think that's the moment where I kind of pass on the difficult question to Stefan.
Thank you for that. I think we are coming from a slightly different avenue. We are saying we are more on a platform level. We are saying for us, digital health or digital asset is our platform, which is consisting of real-world data, routine care data, which is collected at the moment out of 28 hospitals, electronic health record systems at hospitals. That is pulled together, is harmonized, moved to a common data model. We're using NLP, natural language processing, to tease out certain elements from free text that was entered. We are able to produce about 250 labels out of free text, which then refer to symptomology, side effects, any complaints, maybe family history challenges or housing challenges in the psychiatry space. That's an important area. In psychiatry, you don't have any hard endpoints in the sense of there is no lab test to measure depression, for example, right? And that makes it even more difficult in that setting to generate a valuable data set and a rich data set. And I think that's when you to answer your question, what is a digital asset? I think for us, it's really the enriched data set that we have curated with now 1 million patients, which allows a phenotyping of patients. That has been curated over the last 4 years. So that's not coming for free. I think that's a heavy investment, a lot of technology, a lot of hours, man hours that go into that. And that's our definition or our version of a digital asset.
Sara, are you?
No, I'm going to go one step higher.
Yeah, I knew you would. Yeah.
I mean, to us, the digital asset is the tool, of course, for interacting with the healthcare system or the data in itself, right? So we look at not only we look at the patient journey, but we also look at the healthcare provider journey, right? How they interact with the patient from the triage, from the very first part into actually diagnosing and treating the patient. And then as well to the research journey, right? That which Roche is going through, all those research tools as well, clinical trial tools, the decentralized clinical trials, right? And there are all these 3 layers that then make up for what we have as our digital health taxonomy, right? Starting from the health management systems, collecting the data, and then all the way through to the treatment and awareness and adherence solutions.
And if anyone's interested, Galen Growth has a great taxonomy of digital health, right? In case anyone really wants to get into that, so please do check it out. So the question I would then ask you is based on that, what role do you see digital health startups playing in this? Maybe I can start instead of picking Leslie first every single time. Maybe I'll go to you, Sara, first, if that's okay.
So the question: what role do digital health ventures play? From Galen Growth, we're absolutely convinced that the ventures are driving the digital health revolution, right? You have lots of ecosystem players, and I mean, pharma is, of all the partnerships digital health ventures make, pharma consists of 6% of those partnerships, right? It's actually quite a small part of the ecosystem. So it's really the ventures who are coming up with innovation and helping driving it into the ecosystem. Hopefully with partnership with pharma and insurance companies who really help then build the evidence and get those solutions into the market.
Yep. What do you think, Stefan? What is the role of digital health startups in this?
I think it's an important role. I think it's there are each startup is a kind of a small lab in itself that tries out a certain idea or a certain hypothesis. And many of those will not pursue. I mean, many of those will fail and go unnoticed. Even more important are the few examples they succeed. And I think they become then an attractive target for larger pharma and larger companies who can maybe accelerate their processes by engaging with these smaller companies. Oftentimes, what we are seeing, and we are still a small company. We are now 100 people roughly, so still compared to Roche, a very small company. We are still in a at the level where we can maybe less bureaucratic approach certain aspects. We get maybe open doors with hospitals and universities where large pharmas maybe are sometimes seen as a little bit with an ambiguity and maybe not fully trusted that they do the right thing. And I think we are a good intermediate that can come in there. And I think that's in general probably one of the aspects of small companies: fast, agile, building trust. That's where I see the role of small companies.
Great, very cool. How about you, Leslie? Fast, agile, moving, changing the world.
Yeah, I definitely concur with everything my co-panelists said. But I think maybe 5 years ago, we were much less discriminate in thinking like, how can startups help us? And startups were often positioned as the kind of the ultimate solution for everything we're trying to do. And I think now we're a little bit in the messy middle and understanding the how and also the when. And we also recognize it's not always the solution, or just it's not always that easy with collaborating, right? So I think, yes, fast, agile, that is all true. I mean, if we're trying to do something internal versus external, a startup will beat us 10 times on time and resource effectiveness and all of that. But I think for myself, I often put it, I take a twist on this famous African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And for me, it's a little bit, I'll say, if we want to go fast, go startup. But if you want to go far, you probably have to do a decent amount yourself. And so that doesn't mean it cannot evolve a startup, but it's not as easy as to say, I have this problem, and here, a 5-person company, go fix it, right? Because a lot of our problems are deeply entrenched in either the healthcare system or needs, our whole company to come together and to solve. So it's too much of a burden and not realistic to just put that on a startup to solve. So it's really about how can we leverage the part that the startup does so well, but also kind of pull it then into and pull the right people internally around really solving for an issue. So it's only gotten more complicated, but I mean, the one thing I can definitely subscribe 100% is that startups are enormous pillar for what we're trying to achieve.
Great, yeah.
To second that, I think that's what we have seen several times as well, that sometimes as well from a startup perspective, you feel, I have a great product and that's now will solve the world's problem. And then you start talking to senior executives in a pharma company, and they basically tell you, I mean, they have seen this 100 times already and it's not the right thing and not working, and go back and do your homework. And I think that's certainly important for the startups to get early on maybe a sounding board or an opportunity to test certain ideas. I see this as a common problem, or I hear this as well from colleagues around. I think the other aspect to that is the time frame. Right? If we go as small companies, we talk to a large pharma, maybe the next appointment is in 3 months. That's the first engagement. Then there is another 3 months until a larger group comes together. And then you have to do some individual talks over another 6 months. And you need to have a lot of patience and cash at the end, right? For us, for you, it doesn't matter if you do it next year. Next year we do the project next year. Next year maybe we are not here anymore because we run out of cash. I think that's to me another interesting dynamic between these partnerships. That I would oftentimes hope that large pharma would be a little bit more easy to support an initial phase. That you get a little bit of runway, and then you can do a small pilot, which is pocket money for large pharma, but important money for small companies. I think that could be one way of accelerating or making it earlier and more fruitful, de-risking the process for small companies.
Yeah. Stefan, do you know how long did it take Holmusk to develop the first partnerships with pharma companies? Do you know about what that runway was for you?
So we can talk about Novartis. Novartis was 2 years, pretty much. we had luckily, and there is actually, I've seen Valerie in the audience. Valerie was one of these persons. They give us early runway, a small project that was really great to show what we could do. And then after that, it took a little bit more than 2 years to get to real engagement.
Yeah. Obviously, I mean, what we're touching on here is the challenges, right, associated with partnering, which is something that we're really keen on trying to help. Do you? I mean, I don't want to focus too much on the negatives, but what kind of challenges do we face when we think about partnering between startups and pharma? Maybe to you, Leslie.
Yeah, I mean, challenges are important, right? It's important to understand what we're up against, because we all want to work together to achieve great things. I think one is there is a reason why startups are faster, less encumbered, more agile, and often that is that they don't have to cross all the T's and dot the I's. We, as a big company, have to fulfill much more rigorous standards. Some are, or because we are subscribing to the Pharma Code of Conduct. Sometimes we are internally being over conservative, and for good reason, because when one little startup goes belly up, then the world will still stand. But if we have for whatever reason, if we have a big PR nightmare, or even worse, like something actually happens to a patient or a physician, that's dramatic. And so there we have to understand, are we comfortable with startups playing a little bit more fast and loose? And sometimes that's okay in low risk use cases, and then where does it really have to be super rigorous? So that's one challenge we need to understand a little better. I think Stefan really talked nicely about the administrative challenges, that we still have incredibly cumbersome partnering procedures. I think we are absolutely horrible to engage with from a small startup perspective, and we are all cognizant of it, but it takes a lot to change a little system. And then the other thing is just in our nature, we are a global company, right? And so if a startup is really entrenched in one local ecosystem, we are in the business of scaling, and so we have to partner to really understand, how does this work for all markets, not just, if that's the use case, how does it work for all markets, not just one? So those are a few that I'm working through. How about you?
Yeah, challenges. We work with big pharma companies all the time. We work with insurance companies, and it's very much what you Leslie was talking about. It's that understanding when you're trying to put the partnership together, right? Who's really contributing what parts, and how is that, doing the due diligence? Is the startup capable of surviving for the next 2 years until the next milestone? Defining those milestones without knowing exactly where you're going, and getting the partnership right. I think from the get-go, which is nearly impossible when you are in a space like digital health and we don't exactly know where it's going. So I think that's really the core of why partnerships are sometimes a struggle. It's because that initial contract startup and defining the milestones of where it's going is quite a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenging space. I think we see again and again that the move fast, break things mentality of tech in other industries doesn't really fly in healthcare, right? And nor should it. And that's something that we have to be okay with as an industry. So I'm going to switch now and think about opportunities instead, because there is an enormous opportunity for the industry. And I think what we've heard is that startups are becoming more and more part of core business and more responsible for delivering that change. So according to your perspectives, what opportunities do you think there are for startups to change the value chain in pharma? Where are the really interesting opportunities, do you think? You look like you really want to take this one, Sara.
Yeah, well, we just published our Pharma Innovation Index report, so it's quite. So I can go back to my data. We did a heat map, right, of all the pharma companies now, knowing, okay, 50% of the partnerships are with the top 13 pharma companies. So it's very much a steep curve. The big pharmas have the majority of the partnerships. But if you look across that long tail, if the pharma only has, I'm talking about biopharma, biotech and pharma, only has 1 to 2 partnerships, 30% of those partnerships are in research. right? That's like the core, that's the must-have. That's really where almost all biopharma companies agree that's where they can, where digital health can have a big impact on their value chain, right? And then once you get to the bigger pharmas, almost 100% of them have the disease management, right? The digital therapeutics, really the more, Leslie, I think what you're looking into, the digital health that directly involves the patient.
I mean, and what's that about, right? So the research is clear. So, okay, we're accelerating research, we're making it more efficient and cheaper.
Yeah.
But then you have the other brand of startups that are doing what exactly? Is it commercialization? Is it launch strategy? How would you typify that?
The disease management.
Yeah.
Ventures, those are the tools for the patient, either the treatment, so the digital therapeutics actually helping the patient get better, has a lot to do with or it's really big in mental health and women's health at the moment. Disease management is adherence, right? As we know, drugs are only as good as if the patient takes it, so the adherent solution, and then tracking symptoms and really helping the patient become more involved in their own therapy, which everyone seems to believe would have a big impact. It's kind of one of the hypotheses that is still playing out.
Great, yeah. Then maybe to you, Leslie, what opportunities do you see for these companies to really change the value chain?
Yeah, I mean, one lens is to think, in the patient journey and where do we come in, diagnosis, treatment, especially chronic disease management, and all of these are important, and of course R&D effectiveness. For us at Roche, it all kind of comes together under this idea of personalized healthcare and really making sure that patients are treated with the right treatment at the right time, to optimize. And in a larger philosophy, Roche's mission for the next decade is to double scientific advances in clinical outcomes, but at the same time reduce costs to the healthcare system. And I think the only way you can do that is through personalizing care, is through digitizing care, and also change the healthcare system in itself. So it's just two different ways of looking at it. So we very much choose the kind of personalized healthcare, and then under this, it's anything that will make care more individualized, less high touch, less reliant on in-person care. That's huge opportunities, I think.
Great. I'd come to you next, Stefan, because you have more of a broader view, right? And I know that you've done a lot of work on the past on value-based healthcare and thinking about how do we get to the right patient at the right time to fix the right outcome. What opportunities do you think are available for improving the value chain?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have touched on all the elements, but I clearly see this personalized health. I think maybe in the cancer area we have made some mileage. In many other areas we are still very far away from a personalized approach. But I think overall it's the idea is to understand there are different people and different situations in which a patient should get a drug or therapy, whatever it is, and understanding that more in a causal relationship. I think that's, to me, where we have the biggest advantage or the biggest use of modern technology that we can apply. And that, I think, has to do with each individual of us who has now a smartphone and has an opportunity to actually generate data if we provide the right tools. There is a lot of movements in these direct-to-patient trials and patient-reported outcomes, and to basically come closer to real patients and improve or increase the variety of different patients that would be looked at. And I think embracing that breadth of different people in different situations, I think that's where modern technology can make a big impact. And I think that's where we're trying to capitalize on as well.
Brilliant. I'm going to go to a question now from Mentimeter. So just a reminder to our audience at home, please do send your questions via Mentimeter. We're getting some really nice ones coming through already. I'm going to go to one of them now because it aligns nicely with my next question. We see a lot of talk now about open and external innovation. Why is open or external innovation essential to doing this? What do you think about external innovation? Maybe you can give us a bit of colour there. Go to you, Stefan. I haven't had you first yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think nobody can solve everything himself herself, right? There is always somebody better, somebody at least for a certain aspect. Somebody can do something better, more efficient, and I believe the intention here is to collaborate in a smart way of saying, where can I find the best components to answer a certain question, and I believe, and that was, I think, from the intro, what is the finding this right question is actually that's already a major part of the work, right? Identifying and carving out a beautifully, nicely defined question that will always go a pretty long way, and then finding somewhere in the marketplace that right matchmaking which would help solving that problem. I think that's to me the striking hypothesis or command. I would even say that we should collaborate.
I love that image. I feel it's like now at Christmas time, maybe some of you do these family puzzles of like 1,000 pieces, right? And it's just, we don't have the 1,000 pieces. The 1,000 pieces are somewhere in the world. And so you have to have the people bringing the pieces together, not just so you actually have the right set to start playing, but also to help each other understand where they all go. And so we would do that also. We should do that also in like traditional pharma. The thing of beauty is here, because we have more this mentality of, being treatment agnostic and doing this more on the disease area level. We actually have the opportunity to partner much more than in more competitive situations. So I think for me, it's a little bit of a combination, sheer necessity, but also like from the get-go, it was a much more collaborative model in digital health, and I really appreciate that, and I actually think it should radiate into other industry and classic pharma as well.
Yep.
I find it a bit odd question, because when I'm coming from the US, backgrounds in the US, and coming to Europe, I find that there's not much open innovation here at all, right? So many ventures, there's just not this collaboration, not the sharing of ideas that there are in other places in the world. Julian's from Singapore. The ventures will get together all the time, right, in happy hours and actually talk about what they're doing. Here, we don't see that happening. So maybe that's really a barrier here in Europe to innovation, right? We don't see the open innovation at all. The only story I've heard was nice at lunch. Leslie, you can perhaps tell your story about how Roche is actually developing a platform not just for your products. So I mean, I think that might be a good thing to share as to how sometimes we really do need people to develop platforms that are open for sharing, open to share the data, which currently aren't too many ventures that share their data without a fee, and develop that a bit more. But you can share the story if you'd like.
Yeah, I think it's just in general, it's not accepted anymore to provide a solution that's really just focused on one treatment. So and I'm happy about that, because that should have never been, the idea. And so I think unless it's really for whatever reason directly tied to a molecule, we're developing this for the whole disease area. And that's of course the choice, but it's also in a way no longer a choice, because the market will also just reject it if it's not. So it's a little bit of both ideology and necessity.
Stefan, when we think about this role of open innovation, what role do you think open innovation programs like DayOne can play in this change? How can they be most useful?
I think they have an important role to play as this matchmaking link, or this link in between. We have been working across the globe with a number of different accelerators, and we find always, not all of them are good, but some of them are really good, and were helping us in making inroads, connecting us to the right person in a particular company, which otherwise, if you want to talk to Roche, how do you talk to Roche? I mean, it's not easy to find the right contact in one of these 2 towers, right? Or 3 towers by now. So I think these forums and these accelerators have an important role to play in that matchmaking. And yeah, we are glad that they are existing, and we hope more of them exist in a good, positive fashion. I think, as I said, we have seen as well some, platforms they didn't work out for us. Maybe for others they do. So I think you probably, as a startup, I'm just reflecting as we speak. Maybe as a startup, you need to consider the profile of a certain accelerator and then choose with whom you want to go. Not all accelerator will help you, but some of them do. At least from our own experience, I can tell.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions coming through on Mentimeter as well, which are obviously from companies thinking about how they can partner with pharma. One of the questions is asking, it's quite a cheeky question, but it says, if Series A is supposed to be the sweet spot for partnerships with pharma, how do you explain pharma wants to have startups with a 2-year cash runway? And this is one of the, I mean, the question I would ask you is, if you were a startup trying and thinking about creating a business model which depended on a go-to-market strategy around having a pharma client, how would you be thinking about setting yourself up, and what would you be thinking about doing? You're nodding, Leslie, so I'll go to you.
Yeah, I think partnering, this is an unplanned plug, but partnering with someone like DayOne, I think would be really helpful. Not just because you guys are exceptionally well networked and linked into the pharma companies, which, to your point, makes really a difference, because it's all in who do you get to speak to, right? Mm-hmm. And so the other thing is, you have to find that sweet spot between where you collaborate very early to get the very particular feedback and requirements from that pharma company, so you can actually build it to their their challenge that they're trying to solve, while at the same time being credible enough, right? And I think that's where you can be a little bit kingmaker, because at that time, there's just a huge amount of startups out there, and we don't have the mind space to engage with 500 of them to understand if they're right? And I think that's where you can really say, hey, this is early stage, but we believe this is actually worth your time and investment and co-creation really early on in the stage. And that's something that the startup that's a case the startup cannot make on its own. So I feel that's another really great value proposition you offer. Yeah.
Stefan, you've been part of that journey, right? So maybe you can tell us a little bit.
I think this wetting idea, I think that's an important one for the platform. And I mean, certainly it's a long journey that you need to start somewhere, and I think how do you define this starting point? That's probably the critical element. You need to have a certain product as a startup. You need to have something to show where somebody is interested in, right? So how do you get to that? I think the key in my mind is to be really focused, to do something rather small and do this extremely good, and then find somebody who can use that, and then find this value proposition, or develop the value proposition for that specific fit in a certain company. And that's probably around the therapeutic area. It's probably around the molecules, what they have in their pipeline. It's probably understanding the screening process of a molecule, or whatever, wherever you want to find your point. But I think you need to crystallize a really strong value proposition in order to make that first step that somebody is listening to you. And I think you cannot bet on, we co-create something now with Novartis, right? There are hundreds, thousands of people, they want to co-create something with Novartis. So I think it's your, as a startup, the homework you need to do is to define a crystal clear product that's rather small, I believe, rather focused, that will help one of these 1,000 puzzle pieces. One puzzle is good enough, right, to make this first start.
Great advice. Sara, I'm going to zoom out with you, which I love to do because you have a very bird's eye view on the whole system, right? You're seeing all the trends, you're going through thousands of these partnerships a year, looking at all of them, categorizing them. What are the kind of trends that you're seeing in terms of partnering at the moment? Maybe you could tell us a bit about that.
Mm-hmm. And I think, the startups partnering with Roche have a bit of an advantage because Roche tends to partner a bit younger. We see, looking across the pharma industry, that Roche falls actually in the bit of the middle, if not the lower end of the maturity of the ventures that they start with or that they'll partner with. So as long as the partnership's set up right, I think it's an advantage to the partnership. It may take a little bit longer, but then you get exactly the solution that you want at Roche. Other pharma companies tend to wait a little bit longer until the venture is more mature before actually engaging, which of course means then the venture needs to have the solution and have a little bit, they talk about a Series A, at least a Series A under their feet, right, and have a bit of financial stability. Because then you can't, if you're not going to rely on the pharma company to help with the funding, which do your due diligence, find the right pharma company, good luck with that. Looking at the general trends, your question, Lucas, with the across the industry, as I mentioned before, only 6% of the partnerships across the globe are with pharma companies, right? So it is actually a small percent. Ventures are finding that actually venture-to-venture partnering, right? There's a lot of venture-to-venture acquisition right now. A lot of that's going on in parallel to the pharma, right? Digital health has a lot to do with health systems, has a lot to do with payers, right? There's a huge ecosystem that has to be tapped into outside of pharma. Looking at just the pharma, of course, it's the personalization of the diagnosis, of the treatment that we see really taking the top spots when it comes to pharma. That means on the top is of course oncology, right, which is a lot of the focus right now of the partnerships with pharma companies, and that then covers the research part as well as the treatment. So that's kind of a general trends as to what we're seeing there.
Brilliant. We talk a lot about general trends, don't we, when we talk about digital health or when we talk about anything, but actually when we get down to it, it's actually a different world in every market, especially in digital. Sometimes it can be even worse than other regulated industries. How do you experience that, Leslie? I know you've had a role which touches on lots of different global markets. Digital is very different in each one, right? Maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's also... I feel a lot of where I do translation towards our established pharma colleagues, right? Because the pharma business model, the value proposition of a drug, it's more or less understood. I mean, you take a medicine, you get better, it's going to be paid by your insurance, sometimes a little bit out of pocket. In digital health, it's anything but, right? And each market, we have to look at the quadruple value proposition of, what's the value proposition for the patient in the patient journey? What's the value proposition for the physician? What's the value proposition for the system, payer, insurance, hospital, the one who pays, really? If that's not the physician, often it isn't. And then what's the value proposition for us as a company in that particular market? And all of them tend to be different by market, but where we see the biggest fluctuation is really in the physician. It's really how is the physician incentivized? And that will really inform our business model, our value proposition. And that's just something that's very hard to scale. I guess at some point we'll see archetypes, and these are often tied to the actual healthcare system in the market. But that's just a higher degree in customization that I have experienced versus the pharma world.
Yep. Stefan, you've done the whole Singapore, Europe, US thing, I guess. So there's a big difference between Europe and US. Maybe you could tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think across all different, Asia, US, Europe, there are clearly significant differences in the way of we are approaching data and the way we are approaching healthcare as overall as a process, how it's organized, who has access, who has no access, is it out of pocket, is it reimbursed, huge differences from a system level. I always find as well the societal values, which are probably a reflection of that process and that system, which plays a major role. If I compare US, which is largest market, most dynamic, biggest investors, that's all in the US, unfortunately, from a European perspective. When we go back to Europe, then there are a lot of concerns. Data privacy is a big issue. You have people not so willing to invest in a pathway which is not yet so clear where it will end up. Rather reserved, rather protecting the assets what we have generated in past in the past lives, rather than looking into the future of saying what can we do actually with that technology today, and where could we be in 10 years if we apply modern technology. I think this mindset to me is really telling, and I think there we could as in Europe or in Switzerland, Germany, France, I think we could make major changes or make major steps in towards a more innovative, innovation-friendly, more risk-taking approach. I want to say, I'm not saying that we should put the data privacy aside, not at all. I think taking care of our data and minimizing the risk that goes into the wrong hands is absolutely crucial, is non-negotiable. But there is still a certain balance to take. And there are good security levels today, and that's maybe a separate topic. I don't know whether we're going to address that on cloud and security and data privacy. That's I'm not sure whether we come to that, but that would be maybe a separate full evening to talk about that.
It's not irrelevant though, right? Because I mean, we discussed earlier that the concept that pharma doesn't necessarily have those software capacities, right? So when it's trying to do this work, it often comes up to fundamental problems like we don't know how to do cybersecurity. We're used to doing medical device regulation, but this is a completely different thing. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, Leslie, and then I'll...
Yeah, I mean, we have anyway a global cybersecurity shortage, right? And then we also know that probably we as a pharma company, we think within pharma, we're an extremely attractive employer, but for cybersecurity professionals, we might not be in their top 5, right? So we are really also in a war for talent. And then once you have, and that's, data privacy, same. I mean, data privacy regulations are so quickly evolving. I'm now also thinking regulatory affairs is also such a rapidly evolving space where it's very hard to curate world-leading talent, because as soon as you have them at a certain level, they're off to the next gig and very, very well. So it's about building all of these up. And kind of keeping, maintaining them as well enough to create institutional knowledge, which I think is the thing we're struggling, because it's such a hot space, because talent, the opportunity and the demands so far outpaces actually the availability of talent. It's really something we're almost we're trying to build it fast enough so that it sticks, right? And then the other important thing is that the biggest part of the talent we actually have to make ourselves, because it's not just enough to have a few experts. A lot of these experts have actually worked in completely different contexts, so they need to be taught as well how to come together. And then I think the biggest learning curve is actually for the people who are not necessarily considering themselves as working in digital health, but who are essential for a pharma company to implement these things, to actually be sufficiently fluent in the context. So it's something we really put a lot of effort in and thinking, and by no means we have figured it out, but it's definitely a priority.
Excellent. I'm just gonna, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, Roche is one example. I was on a panel, or I was hosting a panel with Biogen 2 months ago, and they've created their own digital health division, right? Their own software division within Biogen. right? If that works or not, time will tell. We won't judge there, and it's totally different cultures, like you said. So trying to merge that, and then they have, of course, the matrix, and trying to cross, right, the pharma mindset with the tech mindset. But there are different ways of doing it, and there are other pharma companies that are indeed really trying to go into the tech direction.
Great. We have a lot of questions on the Mentimeter that are asking things like, why don't we see more collaboration between the established companies in the way that they are sourcing and dealing with startups? How do we, maybe Basel needs like a Kendall Square where we can all come together and work on something like that. It exists. It's called DayOne. But the question I have is, the question I have for you is, what can we do together to improve the Digital Pharma Playbook? And then I'll take a question from the audience if anyone would like to pose one. But yeah, what can we do together to improve the situation right now?
I mean, I think what we see here in Europe, because we're talking about Switzerland, we're talking about Europe, how is helping startups make that step. In Europe, was it 70% of all funding deals are grants, are government-based funding deals, right? How do you help startups make that step in Europe to get beyond that, to find the investors for the Series A, right? To start that journey so they're not so reliant on the pharma partners. You know, that's going to make a huge difference in building the more mature and less mature ecosystem to really help bump up those startups.
I like this idea a lot, and I mean, we have gone through, I don't know how many grant proposals. No, it's a huge resource sink. I mean, you spend so much time on those grants, and then suddenly either you don't get anything. Usually you don't get anything. If you get something, then it's at best they cover your cost. Yeah, no commercial rates, I mean, at all, and that's limiting the runway a lot. Yeah, so I think I would fully support what you're saying.
50% in the US or in North America, 50%, and here it's 70% of those funding rounds. Yeah. So it's a huge difference.
Yeah. And then the other option is to look at large pharma and hope that they would give a little bit earlier more money away, or take some more risk and not offload the risk to the startups. Mm.
I feel also there we need really institutions like DayOne to offer this joint space, because if I think about our experience, for example, to do cross-industry consortia with other players, oh my God, we are as slow in creating agreements between big company as we are with startups, you know? I mean, these things take so much time. So it's almost like that doesn't seem to be an effective way of cross-industry collaboration. I mean, I'm sure it's effective, but it's just not for, you know, in the fast-paced environment that we're moving into. I think grassroots, what I'm trying to do is a lot of this, right? And be really open and transparent with colleagues from all across industry. So I've never been so when I was in pharma, I was not at all well networked, really kind of across, and that's really different in digital health, and I can feel the spirit from everywhere. So I feel like grassroots, us all going out networking is probably one of the most powerful, promising short-term ways to fix it. But for the rest, we're looking to DayOne.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to take one question from the audience, if there is one. Does anyone have any questions to our panelists? We have one over here. Thank you, Rahel, for running for us.
I'm Mingzhou from startup. We are building an analytics solution to reduce the work for programming. And my question is, when we have a solution that is focusing on the efficiency, while your bigger pain point may be like patient management, disease management, and obviously you're running a lot of budget, like hundreds of millions investing to this patient management process. But like, how would you consider a data analytics solution that can help you save some millions? Like when you have limited time and energy to think about things, then the small things, the small savings, do you really consider or just let it go, or how would you think?
I think it's a great question, right? It's kind of about that when there is an evident cost saving to you in terms of efficiency. Can you take it, and do you take it, and if not, why not, right? And that's one of the things that we find frustrating sometimes. So maybe, I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it goes really back to you need to find the right person to discuss this, right? So if it's about R&D effectiveness, you either have to find really the person who is senior enough, but at the same time tuned in enough to really understand where the pain point is, because a lot of time we know it's a pain, but we're not really sure where it hurts, right? And so first you need to kind of be lucky that we know where it hurts, and then you can speak to that person. And that's why, again, your brokerage is really important, because you can help tease that out. Because if you just have a huge organization on our end and a huge amount of startups with unclear use cases, right, that are more looking for guidance where to run, that's just too much to handle in a way. So either the startup really has to kind of settle on something and just give it a go and then see if it resonates, and if not, kind of pivot, and then directly come with something like, we think it should be this, and then if it's close enough, yes, we're going to continue together. Or we have to really go through kind of a hackathon approach, where it's really about, bringing 40 people a weekend together and then really co-creating from the bottom up. But that's a little bit like this. That's where we need help, right? Because this very exploratory, I have a technology and I'm looking for kind of the problem to solve. That's just a little bit too early stage. And maybe I also misunderstood exactly, where you are. But that's just where I feel like we need your help in making sure that a solution and problem come together. I don't know.
I think, from what I understand, what you're talking about is a health management solution and an IT solution then to improve the efficiency of a healthcare provider, right? And what we see is that health management solutions, these types of IT solutions, at the moment they're very, very piecemeal, right? But they are gaining a lot of momentum, right? Even in building evidence, right? In writing peer-reviewed papers that they do provide outcomes. So don't give up hope. What we saw is during the pandemic, right, you had this huge explosion of telemedicine, and there it brought together a lot of telemedicine providers, right? There was consolidation, big ones, Teladoc, they all popped up, right? And now they're consolidating quite a bit in the industry. And now that was the pain point in the pandemic, getting to see the healthcare profession. Now we know the pain point, huge pain point of the health systems is the efficiency, right? And so that's what we see, where we see, the pain point is there, right? It's the making sure, or helping to get the mature enough solutions in order to consolidate and come up with a complete solution. Because we talked about at lunch, there's the healthcare providers don't have the time to implement all these piecemeal solutions, right? They need a full solution that works together, right? The interoperability was a big buzzword last year, is still a pain point. So keep going, and through these ecosystems, through hopefully getting more pieces of the ecosystem together, right, to consolidate, and maybe there also the investors have a big role to play. They can actually put solutions together, right? There's a huge potential there that actually investors help join solutions, right? So there's a lot going on in the ecosystem, and keep working on the solution, because that is a big pain point that is coming up and will be addressed.
Great. I can hear the apero calling, but I just have one. Did you have a question? Yeah, we just have a question. We'll take one more. Thank you, Rahel.
Yeah. My question is that when I hear digital health, it's such a broad term that it's difficult to grasp for me. And I'm wondering when we have the objective to develop a playbook, if we shouldn't segment a little bit the different dimension of digital health, because here I see a representative of big data, real world data, devices, healthcare system solution, IT solutions. So all of that have different challenges, opportunity, pathways for development and for success. So yeah, I'm always thinking about that, and I would like to know what you think about that.
Thank you very much. Sarah, you're the expert here. You've developed
I can
the
give you
best.
an A4 paper with lots of colorful boxes. It's beautiful, segmented digital taxonomy. See me afterwards.
But then the question I have, is it useful, to have such a detailed categorization and taxonomy? Is it a useful exercise?
Absolutely. I mean, you're looking at very different players depending on which box you sit in, right? And I hope that your playbook as well addresses some of that, right? You're talking about pharma, but pharma is a huge creature, anywhere from research and clinical trials to triage, right? So you absolutely have to segment and absolutely have to address the needs of those different elements. As Leslie said, each player has very different needs, and not only segment digital health, but also the user, right? Is it a physician? Is it a patient? Huge difference.
Thank you very much. So we'll leave it to you for any final comments that you might have, anything else you'd like to add, or one last message that you'd like to give to the audience, and then we'll wrap up. Anything?
Let's collaborate.
Yeah. Anything else? I go with that. Yeah. Great. So I think what we've heard is that we have a real opportunity. There is a transformation happening in the industry, and startups are becoming more and more a part of the core business. And this is creating an imperative for open innovation, which is really pushing forward that need for us to collaborate more and more. So if you would like to do that, then please reach out to DayOne anytime. We look forward to working with you in the future. I'd like to thank again my great panelists for their contributions today, and thank you, Jubin, for traveling over and giving us a presentation on the playbook. Thank you very much.
I'll just jump in very quick. Also from our end, thank you very much to the panel, Sara, Stefan, Leslie, and Lucas, of course. Yes, I think many discussion points came up today, so I'm pretty sure we will continue this series, hopefully next year. So stay tuned. I don't yet have a date to mention, but I'm sure we will be out with the next event soon. I'd like to mention, because I forgot beforehand, that Galen Growth, Holmusk, and DayOne are, of course, part of our community at the Switzerland Innovation Park. So if you know anyone, if you have a project you would like to get part of this community, please, we're just an email away or a conversation at the upper or after. Get in touch and speak to us. And thank you very much for being here with us tonight. I hope you all can join us for a drink or some snacks. And also thank you to everyone who joined us online during this event. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.